This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today we're talking about a subject that I think we all need to think about. And the subject is connecting to your value. And I don't know about you, Candace, but my mother taught me that, I wasn't supposed to boast about the things I did well. And yet, sometimes we have to verbally acknowledge what we do well, not only for others to know, but for us to, get that pat on the back that sometimes we don't allow for ourselves.
Exactly. And we're groomed to be not boastful, as you say, and to, have some level of modesty about our accomplishments or what we think we might have to offer. And the tendency is that the things we do easily, the things that come to us easily, our natural skills, are not valued by ourselves because they come easily. There's this little twist of thinking that being something of value needs to be hard and the things that other people can't do. And so we limit ourselves by our thinking and our other things that we're going to talk about. So what I'm hoping is that this will be a couple of different podcasts, probably more than just a couple. And everything is based on the work of Kyle Cease. It's Cease. And he was a comedian at one time, but now he's a guy who's like really into this idea of value. And I can imagine how hard it would be for somebody in his original field to feel valuable when, you might not be getting applause. You're only as good as your last clapping and those kinds of things. Your ego is constantly on the line.
Right.
And you have a lot of experience in the entertainment field. Where do you bump into that in terms of the people you interview and interact with?
Well, it's interesting because, when you're doing a podcast like we do, and we're not live, so therefore we don't have an audience that may be responding. Sometimes I will get off the podcast and go, hey, that was great, information. We delivered it in such a great way. And then I don't see the numbers of listeners, that would accompany something like that. And then I'll start to feel like, oh, what did I do wrong? Or how could it have been better? And, that's when I start judging everything, which in reality, um, you know, that may not be necessary because somewhere down the line, people will listen, they will like it. And yet, if I don't go back and check it, I have no idea.
Exactly. And it's all externally
Right.
oriented. And so it gets back to that phrase, you're only as good as your last movie. And, you could have a huge body of work that's really beneficial, et cetera, et cetera. But our tendency as humans is to say, all right, where am I lacking? Not where am I contributing in some of these other things.
It reminds me when my brother won his first Grammy. Um, he didn't go to the Grammys because he didn't expect to win. Um, and then my mother was watching the Grammys on TV and she heard his name called, and he hadn't told us that he had won. Okay. And actually it was, his wasn't that night. It was like a previous day where they got awarded. But then they announced it on the Grammys. So my mother called him and said, I'm so proud of you. And he goes, oh, how'd you find out? And so she told him, and he goes, Mom, don't get so excited because just because I won a Grammy doesn't mean I'm going to get the next job. And, sometimes that's what we look at. We look at, oh, this is so great. But to keep up the greatness, there's so much more that you have to do.
Very, very insecure position. I can't imagine what that's like. And it makes me admire entertainers and creatives all the more, because they can, most, not all, obviously, persevere regardless of that.
Right.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, Kyle Cease wrote The Illusion of Money, Why Chasing Money is Stopping You from Receiving It. And so in the context I want to talk about, it's not just money. Money is like an external marker, or can be an external marker of value, but it's not the only yardstick. And he talks about our true value is based on how closely we're connected to ourselves in terms of our creativity and our value, in essence. It's kind of a circular argument. And so most of us don't use our imagination to create things that are beyond our current limiting beliefs. So if you're making, I don't know, what's minimum wage now? I'll just pretend it's $10 an hour. I know it's not. If we're in a $10 an hour job, we tend to think of ourselves as worth $10 an hour.
Right.
That's our value. And so what he's telling us is that our value isn't related to what our current circumstances are. It's related to what our imagination can create, and coupled with our creativity, some of our skill sets and so on. And what we tend to do is we focus on the negative. So it's like looking at an old time photograph where we had negatives. I don't know if some current world might relate to that, or understand what I'm talking about. But there is the positive, the end result on the glossy photograph, and then there's the negative, which is the reverse order. And we tend to focus on the negative and the anxiety it produces of not having enough and so on. And I know there's a whole bunch of writing and philosophy around the idea of coming from a position of scarcity. But when we come from that position, meaning that there's never enough and we have no security and so on, it means that we're not channeling our creativity into what inspires us.
That would make sense.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's trying to reinforce in the book is we are the source of our value, not our income and not our net worth. So that can be a marker, but it's not the source of our creativity. And it reminds me of a quote that I'm really going to bastardize, but basically it's a quote to the effect of, the bird on a limb isn't afraid of it falling because it knows it can fly. So what occurs to you when you hear that?
Wow. And I like that quote, even if it isn't exactly the way. So what it reminds me of is that maybe when other people aren't around, we identify that we have certain talents that we are good at. And then, yet when we get into a room of other people, oftentimes we are afraid to express those things, because what if it's not good enough for the others?
And even ourselves, because we're
right.
in that audience as well, and we're our internal dialogue. And so the idea is we can only go so far as our limiting beliefs, and we can, according to Kyle Cease, we can develop the ability to connect to our ideas and our imagination, the thing that actually creates our value, and go beyond our limited beliefs, and the things that cut us off, like worry and anxiety, that cut us off from that creativity and imagination. So basically, we're not worthy of what we actually are. That our thinking is we're not worthy of that.
Exactly. Yep.
So one of the things that I was fascinated with is he talks about your value is what you can create even if you lose all of your money.
Okay.
So how does that land?
Well, I mean, it reminds me of when I left corporate America, and it was like, no, I'm not going to bring home this really nice paycheck. And so, what is it that I can do? And in the beginning, I felt like I couldn't do anything. Um, my job was my value, um, and so was the paycheck. But once I started thinking about it, it was like there are other things I can do, and they may not have that same um, paycheck reward, but it's been more rewarding, and we've learned to um, accept the different changes that have happened, and really for the better.
Well, and you've created something from nothing, so to speak,
Right.
this whole entity, this production company, and you've created other people in finding where their value is. I mean, thank you for helping me find my voice,
Yeah.
even though it's taken me a long time. And, so that's valuable,
Right.
right? So maybe the monetary awards aren't necessarily there, or maybe they are. I'm not privy to those things. But he talks about Oprah, and he said she's valuable not because of the massive amounts of money she has. That was the byproduct of her value, the valuable stuff she brought into the world. And so she lost it all. She hasn't lost those things that make her valuable.
Well, and is when you put it that way, and I've talked about this publicly, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But when my son got this new job this past year, um, it really um, I helped him identify that yes, he was valuable. He has these talents. There are things that he can do that he hasn't been doing in the past. Um, and when the job ended abruptly, for about a week or so, he was walking around, that like he had no value at all. He was really beaten down. But then he just pulled himself back up and he said, wait a second, I know how to do. And he started making lists, the things that he can really do well. And, he's back out there identifying that to whoever will listen. And I'm talking about like in interviews. And I've seen such a change in him that he now knows his worth, and he's not going to accept anything short of that. Um, and again, it's not necessarily in the dollar figure, it's more about being able to do what he does best.
Yeah, and it to me so reflects the the limb. He's the bird. The limb he was sitting on broke,
Right.
and yet he flew.
Yep.
All right, so I just think there's some beauty in that. The other thing that I really love about what Kyle talks about is we look at what we're receiving and conclude that's our worth. And we continue to think and take action from that limited level of value. So where does that show up?
Well, and again, this is quite interesting. I've been working at this weekend training sales support job now for 4 years, and the company does not believe in raises. And there are bonus programs, whatever. But about a year ago, I was like dragging through on the weekend when I was working. Um, and something clicked. If I can't make this fun, if I can't be more interactive, then I need to get out of this. And I found a way to um, open up, and it now going to work on the weekend. It's not about the money. My reward is when um, one of the staff members, when I hear them selling, they're using, really good technique. They're making sure that their customer is satisfied. Um, the other part is when a customer comes back and says, hey, you helped me with this. now I need something else. And it's like, that's the reward of knowing that, you know, I'm out there helping, and, um, and I know I'm good at it now.
So let me ask you this. One of the other elements he talks about is that the thinking that what we're receiving is what we're worth often leads us to being afraid to leave whatever it is we're doing.
Right.
And then that in turn makes us unable to receive better possibilities. And I'm not saying this is true in your life, but where might that have shown up in the past or now or whatever you care to share?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was in corporate America, I was willing for so long to, um, fight the things that I didn't like about going to work. Um, and when I finally left, and again, it was a great paycheck, great benefits, not just benefiting me, but really benefiting my family. Um, it actually was my younger son who said to me, Mom, you're worth more than that to all of us. Um, and, you're dying on the outside. And once I could accept that my family, um, wasn't looking at me just for the paycheck, um, I found so much more self worth than I ever thought I had.
And again, contributed to probably so many more people. Maybe in the corporate structure you did, but at least more directly,
Right.
with less, you know, middle management or whatever in between.
I
So,
mean, and so many of us, and I hear this all the time. In fact, I have another friend who will only take a job if it pays X amount. And she's been miserable in her jobs. And I've tried asking her, why is that dollar figure so important for you to be so miserable? And yesterday was the first time she said to me, I really have to think about that, because for the last 3 years, I have not been happy in my work.
So a soul sucking job just
Yep.
for the money, which is some representation of her idea,
her worth. Yep.
Her value. And he also talks about by constantly accepting whatever it is we're accepting. Let's just say the salary or the job, whatever, however we want to quantify it, at a lower amount, it means we're going to be unable to open up for more. And I was talking with a colleague yesterday, and she decided to leave her job. It's with an organization of 9 years. She's been wanting to leave it for 9 years, and she was exposed to this material as well. And she finally realized that that was keeping her from actually fulfilling her dream, which was to offer some programs in a totally different area. And so she gave notice, and she's leaving, and you can almost see her floating and expanding before your eyes, because that sense of safety of the paycheck and so on, while it gave her some sense of safety, it also was feeding her sense of anxiety and insecurity, because she wasn't thinking if the limb broke, she could fly.
Right.
But now she sees it.
Well, don't you think it's the outside sources that, um, don't that sort of muddy up the waters for us. Thinking about that bird, if every other bird around him was flying and saying, hey, when the limb breaks, you're gone, um, they can convince you that you can't do what you want to do. And that's what I found when I was getting ready to leave corporate America. I had so many people say to me, well, what are you going to do when you have to replace your car? And what are you going to do, to, whatever it is that you need? And that kept me from really stepping out of the door. Um, it wasn't until, like I said, my son said to me, Mom, you can do so much more and you'll be happier. And, you know, that's what I needed. I needed somebody to remind me that I wasn't going to fail.
Well, and the other part is, bringing creativity to it. So, how would you guard against that? So you might buy a new car before you leave corporate America, or, just opening up to all the ways it could work rather than saying, no, I have to hunker down and stay safe on this limb that may or may not be safe. I mean, look how many people got laid off during COVID.
Right.
Restaurants that torpedoed and all sorts of things. It appeared to be safe and sound, but it can be a soul sucking experience if you're not doing it intentionally, if you don't see how you could be creating and expanding your value.
Right.
So the idea is, he talks about, that constantly accepting things at a lower value because we're unable, which means we're not able to open up to more. And then he talks about this connecting to our value is at the expansion of the edge of creativity, sharing our gifts with more people, and doing what he calls hell yes actions. So what shows up internally when you think of a hell yes actions and sharing your gifts with more people and so on?
I think it's just, about feeding your confidence that, okay, this may not have worked, and the limb is breaking and I'm starting to fall, but hey, I can catch myself. I can, fly up to another limb. Or if I choose, I can stay here on the ground and find something else that's satisfying.
Exactly. And so when we think from that perspective, other things open up to us. But if we're only thinking about hanging on to something that might be shaky or not even there anymore, it's going to confine us. And the idea is, he said, we need to make space to receive on a new level by disconnecting from those limiting beliefs. One, just catching ourselves in the act of the limiting beliefs. This is what we talk about all the time. Just, noticing where those limiting beliefs are popping up, and then move from the thing that seems to keep us safe and recognize that it may be actually limiting us.
Interesting. Yep.
And then move to what excites us. And it can be incremental. It doesn't have to be, okay, burn the boat, I'm doing this, come hell or high water. But basically, he calls it creating a new internal alignment, so that we're not that we're just thrill seekers, but that we're reigniting that excitement in us rather than being complacent. So letting go of the things that reinforce the old, smaller vision of value, and do the things that will grow us beyond our past limits. And then he segues into the way we spend our time is a marker of how much we value ourselves. This one really had a wallop for me. I ebb and flow in terms of, what I think being effective looks like, and other times where I'm just kind of floating. I've run out of cope or energy and so on. I just came back from a trip, and on Saturday, it was a red eye when I came back. And on Saturday, I had everything I can do to stay conscious. I was just exhausted. And because it was in a different time zone. So I was straddling the two different time zones and so on. I was just zapped. So I didn't get all the things on my to-do list done, the things that, maybe limit me, started to notice it in a different light. So where might that show up for you or people you know?
Well, I think my biggest issue with that is I want to believe that I can always do things no matter what the time of day is, no matter how I feel. Um, but I realize when I do, um, I'm I'm overextending myself. And so recently I am more like, you know what, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right, at least right in my mind. Um, and so I will limit, you know, the amount of energy I'll put into certain things because as I've talked about many times, I don't want to do something wrong. And if I don't have the energy to do it right, I'm learning to take that step back and know that it'll get done, but it'll just get done at a different time.
And maybe it's not something you need to do.
Right, right.
That's a hard one. And in fact, in this group that I talked to on Sundays, there were a couple of people talking about somebody had hired a virtual assistant, and she wasn't entirely pleased with the virtual assistant. She was hoping the virtual assistant would take things off of her plate, and instead the virtual assistant kept coming to her saying, well, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to do it? Well, the person's conclusion was, I can just do it myself better. But then that means she's not spending times on her higher value activities. She's spending time on the lower activities where theoretically she could pay somebody. So rather than looking at it in terms of maybe this isn't the right virtual assistant, the conclusion she made is she needed to do it.
And, that's how I've been most of my life, especially around my family. Um, and it's funny because in my laundry room, I have this 1-page list. And I put it up there about 3, 4 years ago when I had my knee replacement. And it was for my family to look at. These are the things that need to get done and when. Um, and my family can never remember what I like to eat. So I put, my favorite foods. Um, and it's still up there. And every once in a while now, when my husband will say, well, I have no idea what you'd want me to do today, I just tell him, go in the laundry room, look at the list. And it's so much easier than in the past when he would say, well, I don't know how to fold the clothes right. And then I would say, well, okay, just give them to me. I'll do it. And now he goes and he looks at the list, and sometimes he does what's on the list and sometimes he doesn't. But it it takes that burden off of me of having to, think that he's not capable and then just taking over the chore.
Yeah, and we've had that conversation before. In an office setting where I used to work, we called it male acquired ignorance syndrome, and forgive me for being sexist, but it tended to be gender related in terms of socializing, I think, that if you don't do it well, you're not asked to do it. And the female person tends to, and again, I understand this is a total oversimplification, but it was our observation in
Sure.
our particular setting, is that the young female person would tend to step forward and say, I'll do it. And that's how that person got mired down in some of the lesser skill levels, because it would be embarrassing to admit we couldn't do something that simple.
Exactly.
Not for everyone, apparently. So anyway, it was good for a lot of laughs and so on. And at least we started noticing it and making things a little more equitable. So in this setting, though, anchoring back to connecting to your value, if you're doing those things, then it means you're not doing other things. If your time is consumed with X, it means you can't do Y. And if Y is something that excites you and it's something you can do well, then that's connecting to your value, not just for yourself, but for others, that you can share with others. And so that's kind of the gist of this part of his book. And I do want to explore it more because I have not seen this material in another setting. And it's much of it is very nuanced. It's a little hard sometimes in the first pass through to get your head around it, but just being able to pay attention to the areas where we define our value based on our current situation and not and that is a limiting belief. Because who says, if Oprah had always looked at herself as being worth what she was a local, I don't even think she was an anchor. I think she was like a special,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
whatever, on a small TV station, she would still be there, or probably would have retired with a retirement package. But look what she did. She had all that other stuff, and I guess the confidence, given her background and stuff, she got that someplace. Plus, a lot of skill and talent, etc. So, looking at the way we spend our lives, if listeners want to play a game with themselves, they can just spend a few weeks noticing where they're spending their time relative to the things that excite them. And then we raise our value by making our time more valuable. And we make our time more valuable by doing things that expand and change and move us beyond our current limiting beliefs.
Well, I love that. And I think I'm going to do more exploring because, it's no fun to get stagnant. And sometimes we, reflect what our value is, but we don't make the changes we need. So, yeah, I think that's going to be on my agenda.
And I think it'll be fun.
All righty. Well, we will do this again in 2 weeks. In the meantime, everybody, have a great day. Stay safe. And Candace and I will talk to you soon. Have a good one.
Thank you, Karen.